If you're looking for the best AP Psychology free response tips, then stay tuned because by the end of this video, you're going to have 20 FRQ tips to help you as you master the concept application question as well as the research question. If you haven't watched our prior video on the 5 steps to writing effective AP Psychology FRQs, be sure to check that video out. We've helped millions of students score 4s and 5s on their AP exams, and you can be next. First, let's go into 7 concept application question tips and test taking strategies. The first tip that we have is to be mindful of the time that you're spending for the concept application question. These are supposed to be pithy responses comparatively to the research question, so don't spend too much time answering these concept application questions. The second tip is to always define the term that you are about to use before you apply it back to the concept. You typically won't earn points for just defining the concept, but what this will help you do is ground yourself in your response before you try to apply the concept to the specific scenario that's being given to you. Which leads us to our third tip, which is to remember that defining a term alone is not enough to score the point. You have to also apply that term to the specific scenario. Our fourth tip is from a few teachers who have suggested that students underline the term as they define it for the reader to see. This is totally up to you, but it could be a helpful way for you to signal to your reader that you are making an effort to define that term and apply it to the scenario. If you decide to do what we just suggested, an easy way to do so is to remember UDA, which is UDA. The U stands for underlining the term or concept, D stands for defining it without using the term in the definition itself, and then the A stands for applying it to the specific scenario. That leads us to tip number 6, which is when you are defining the term, make sure that you do not use the term in your definition. Use synonyms instead to explain specifically what that term means. Our 7th and final tip when it comes to the concept application question is to leave a line break between your responses. This can just make it easier for your reader to navigate your response because everybody has different styles of writing and different legibility when it comes to how clean their handwriting is. Alright, so that wraps up our 7 concept application question tips. Let's dig into the research question tips. We have 3 AP Psychology research question test taking tips. So digging into our first one, which is to make sure that you are reviewing your definitions every day for the last 2 weeks leading up to the exam. You want to make sure that you're super confident in identifying the operational definition of different variables. You have to be able to answer things like, what is a hypothesis? What is an independent variable? What about a dependent variable? What are the difference between those two? There are helpful links on Quizlet for different flashcard sets that go over key operational definitions that are commonly tested. The second tip is to remember to include a topic sentence in your response. This can help give your responses some direction so that your responses are interpreted to be coherent as opposed to a jumbled mess. And the third tip is to remember that when you are supporting evidence with case studies or other examples, be sure to explain specifically why you are bringing this into your response. Link it back to the prompt and apply it to the specific scenario. Now let's dig into 10 general AP Psychology test-taking tips. The key thing I want you to remember as we go over these is that these can be applied for both the concept application question as well as the research question. The first tip is to remember that you need to be writing in complete sentences. You cannot just use bullets or incomplete sentences in your response. They will not be graded. The next tip is to remember to use your question sheet as a place to outline your thoughts before you begin responding. This is a good opportunity for you to think about the examples or case studies that you want to bring into the specific question part. The third tip is to remember that you need to be concise and direct. Do not skirt around in your response or bring in abstract generalizations. Tip 4 is to remember that points are only given for the right answer. So this isn't a history class. Do not feel the urge or necessity to include an introduction or a conclusion in your response. The 5th tip is to remember that you should not make diagrams or lists. Only answers that are in complete sentences will be graded. Our next tip, number 6, is to use the appropriate psychological terms when you're responding to the FRQs. This is especially applicable when it comes to using proper names of theories or theorists that you're going to bring into your responses. Tip number 7 is to remember that you can't lose points for something that is incorrect unless what you got incorrect contradicts part of a correct response. Tip number 8 is to answer what you know first. So just leave a few spaces for you to go back to things that you can't think of in the moment and then go back to it later. This is a good way for you to allocate your time efficiently and make sure that you're scoring as many points as you possibly can. Which leads us to tip number 9, which is if you're low on time, feel free to scratch out parts of your response that you don't want your reader to grade. This is a fast way for you to get back on track and still be able to answer all the questions. You'll actually find this in the sample responses from other students in the past, and it does not affect the way that they are graded. And our last tip is to use videos to review key concepts and theories. There are tons of helpful playlists out there. We'll include one in the description that goes over some key concepts and theories that you'll find helpful in your AP Psych. 3 additional resources for you to check out when it comes to AP Psychology. The first one is AP Central, which will give you all the previously released exams, complete with detailed explanations as well as scoring guidelines, common student mistakes, as well as sample responses. This is a great way for you to familiarize yourself with the sorts of questions the College Board will ask you. The second resource is Albert's AP Psychology Review Guide. This is our free resource on our blog, which provides you a self-paced study guide that you can use with either Albert or any other review guide as you prepare for your AP Psychology exam. And the last resource is Albert's AP Psychology course. This provides hundreds of multiple choice questions with detailed explanations, as well as original free response questions and full-length practice exams so that you can simulate what the AP Psychology exam is like. This is just a helpful way for you to reinforce all the learning that you've had this school year and apply it in a test-like environment ahead of the exam. Lastly, comment below, which tip did you find most helpful, or what questions do you have about the AP Psychology exam? We'd love to hear from you. And if you haven't already liked and subscribed to our channel, be sure to do so because we provide tons of helpful AP content like this for not only AP Psychology, but also other AP subjects. That's it for this time though. I'll see you guys next time.